Hey everybody, it's the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and you are watching the weekly Wringer series here on clanofthegraywolf.com. Well, we've got a lot going on this week that we have to get done, and should be a good one. I'm looking forward to this one. Anything to follow up from last week's epic rant about PlayStation, which many of you commented on. Before I get into that, I'll let you know that today I'm going to wrap up our conversation from last week surrounding Mother's Day and our Mother's Day themed question about parents and gaming. I'll give you my own kind of experience in that regard. And then we will, move straight on to next week's Wringer question, which is going to be really focused on a specific part of Google I/O and a keynote presentation that was given there in a new product line offered by Google. So, let's see, where to start from last week. I want to say this first and foremost. Many of you made comments about kind of the format of how things went last week with the PlayStation brand rant that I went on. I'm going to call it a rant because I think that's kind of what it was. I can't believe when I finished the video that I had actually spoken for maybe 23, 24, or even 25 minutes, I don't remember, strictly about one particular topic. I didn't even go through a lot of community contributions, and that anybody that knows this series knows that that is pretty rare for me. So I've said this before, but I always thought the Wringer would be like a 6-minute maximum video each week. It's why I signed up. It's why I got doing it. But I certainly don't mind that it's taken off, and I like that we're spending more time. But I always was really worried if I made it that long, nobody would listen to it, nobody would watch it, and nobody would care, right? And so I have to say, there were so many of you this week that said, hey, this was a little unusual, but it was a little bit more like a traditional vlog where you just kind of flip on the camera and talk about something. And it sounds like you guys didn't mind that, and so I just wanted to say I appreciate it. I appreciate the feedback, and thanks for watching, as I would always say. But it's good to know that if I just kind of go and talk about something, you guys are still going to be there, still going to be watching and taking it all in. So, great community, very proud of that, and I'm going to look forward to the conversations we have in the future, whether they happen to be about rants or really about kind of more the traditional questions here on the Weekly Wringer. I'll also start out by saying to Lester out there, no, absolutely, I don't think I necessarily needed hugs. I don't really think it was necessarily in bad spirits last week. But so I don't think I needed a hug. I think it was fairly a normal kind of week, but I will say that hey, you guys show up, you put me inside of your homes or watching on the other end of your computers every week. So, I'll give you all virtual hugs. And you can give me a virtual hug every week. There's no problem with that. Okay, but no, I don't, thanks for the offer, but I don't think I needed hugs. I will say this too, I've had 2 straight weeks in a row being very, very, very busy. And when that happens, I don't have a whole lot of time to be editing, and what ends up happening is that the Weekly Wringer gets pushed back to a very early Tuesday morning launch, and I don't like that, guys. And that's not the format I always wanted to really follow on. The Weekly Wringer should be posted Monday mornings, and it almost always has been. It's just for the last 2 weeks I've been very busy. So hopefully a lot of that stuff's cleared off now. I will be able to get the Weekly Wringer back up to when it's regularly scheduled on Mondays from now on, barring major upload problems, which I've also experienced, but it's okay. Should be fine from now on. Let's see. So last week we spoke about we talked about the PlayStation, obviously, and by the way, that there is a forum topic that's been opened under the Weekly Wringer forums, and if you go over there, you'll see a PlayStation brand discussion. A lot of folks have already started to post. I'm going to be posting throughout, just trying to kind of gauge. I love it when we talk about something in the Wringer and it kicks up a conversation that might need 2, 3, 4, 5 comments. And in that case, we want to keep the forums lively, and so I kind of dumped that conversation there. And if we want to keep talking about it, we'll keep talking about it as long as we need to. It gives me a reason to check the forums, right, guys? For all of you that are disappointed I'm not on there more often. Okay, so let's see here. We talked about the PlayStation conversation. Then I asked you guys a question in honor of Mother's Day, what your parents thought about video games. And it seems to me there are kind of three different camps. And thank you for all of your contributions, as always. Lots of great stories and lots of different experiences. But I think things tend to fall into three fairly broad categories, right? You have, and not always both parents share the same categorization of video games either, by the way. But we have either they're gamers themselves, they're neutral, as in, you know, they really couldn't care any less. It's just games that are just something else that their child does. Or they are actually actively anti-gaming, or I guess actively or passively anti-gaming. And we had several stories there for really each of those categories. Just a few contributions I wanted to talk about is first, Mr. Kettleman gave the story of escapism for his own mother in some very difficult situations, and kind of how he had to hijack the GameCube and bring it to the aid of his mom. I thought that was a really cool story. You know, I'm always interested. You guys know me very well. You know that I'm very interested in understanding just some of the great stories about how video gaming can really positively impact people's lives. I mean, we hear so much about how they're so awful, and you know, ever since the whole Tipper Gore thing, which was mentioned by a few of you out there, we've really had to justify for you know, legitimate or illegitimate purposes. We've had to justify video games as being a legitimate, not only just art form, but a pastime. And so I always like to hear those kinds of stories about how people really are helped getting through life using video games. I think it's fantastic. Let's see. Mr. K had the kind of anti-gaming story very briefly about the pastor that came out against Zelda and Zelda and then ended up getting returned by his mom. Wow, you know, I mean, that's pretty extreme. Can't say I haven't had similar experiences myself, but not necessarily because of a pastor or any kind of things like that. But isn't it interesting, folks, how some folks really talk about video games and kind of the content of video games without really knowing a whole lot about them? And usually what ends up happening is they hold up just the beacons of really terrible examples, right? The worst examples you can think of to make that kind of an argument. Mortal Kombat changed games forever, with being the center of that argument, and I think that's it's unfortunate that those are still the examples people use today. So let's see. So yeah, there were a couple of folks out there that, and I think everything else just kind of fit into those camps that I spoke of. And you know, for those of you with gamers as parents, it sounds like that's really cool. It sounds like there's been some interesting experiences with that. Maybe even you picked up gaming from your parents, which is pretty sweet. Maybe your parents didn't like games, but you know, you kind of fought, and eventually they kind of caved in, and it became something that you were into, and maybe that's one of the reasons why you're here. So there's some pretty cool stories out there, and I want to thank you guys for contributing as always. Here's another thing I want to talk about before I get into my thoughts about everything. A lot of new folks this week. I'm not sure if the PlayStation conversation kicked up the dust a little bit, or if folks are interested in talking about their experience with their parents, or as we heard some folks say, we had some folks that were longtime watchers, first-time commenters. No problem. Welcome to the commenting side of things. That's how you get noticed here on the Weekly Ringer. For those of you that love to just watch, no problem with that at all. But commenting certainly makes the series continue, so I appreciate it and wanted to draw some attention to that. It's great to have all of you. A couple of you I noticed by name, WYVV, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, I don't know how to say that. Predmon, Flea420. What I'm going to say is Nightwing Griff. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Sorry if I mispronounce it. And Dragono1130. Welcome to the community. Great to have you guys as commenters, and I loved your contributions and can't wait to see what you have to offer for me in the future as well. I wanted to highlight the story also by Nightwing Griff, I think is what it is, and the story of conversion, of kind of opening the floodgates for one of your parents into to bring them into gaming and show them that the experience is pretty amazing, and then you see those things playing out, and then they kind of come into the community as well. I think that's really cool. So thanks for sharing that story as well. All right, so now to my experience. I would say my experience with my parents, I have to say, one of the folks, again, a new commenter, Predmon, kind of summed up really my experience as well for my parents. My mother would not have known, as I think Predmon had said, a D-pad from a joystick or something. I don't remember exactly what you had said precisely, but it was something along those lines. My mom was absolutely the same way. She would never have picked up a controller. She never would have played games. I don't ever remember her ever doing anything besides when the Wii launched, and then she was able to get up and play. She loved playing Wii tennis and stuff like that, and so it kind of opened up new alleyways. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about the Wii. Some people hate it, but one of the things I love about it is that it opened up alleyways for people that never ever would have played games, never would have considered themselves gamers, stepped up to the plate and could play games and could really have a lot of fun. And I love hearing stories too. Some of you mentioned, I think, what effects those have. You know, I mean, a lot of people bought Wii balance boards and Wii Fit and all these other kinds of things because they wanted to lose weight. So now they're playing video games to make themselves, you know, I guess to continue on their weight loss regimen or whatever the case might be. But man, I guess that makes them gamers now. I don't know. We've had a conversation about that too before in the Weekly Ringer. So anyway, that's my mom. As far as my dad, this is an interesting conversation. My dad actually did not let us have video game consoles. Would not let us have them for the longest time. So we were allowed to have computers, and we were allowed to play computer games on the computers. But for one reason or another, my parents both felt like the consoles were a completely different conversation, and they didn't want to be a part of it. So that just kind of got axed. So anyway, but hence why I had my Commodore 128, which is the basis of my nick for the site. So, and how most of you know me now. So for most of my time that I was at home, we didn't have consoles. We either played them from other people playing it at buddies' places, or my cousin, or what, people would bring game systems over and whatnot. So it kind of didn't work out that way. But once we got one system in, it kind of just built and built and built, and eventually we ended up having a lot of different systems, and especially during the height of the late 90s when 64 and PlayStation were really hot. We had both of those, and we're really sporting them in every way possible. But my dad was not a gamer at all as well. But I would say my dad was more neutral, and my mom was more anti-gaming. My dad thinks it's a pretty cool concept. He's kind of a technology person. But my mom was never that way. She was never the kind of person. In fact, I mentioned before about how a game got returned. I remember one Christmas my brother got Vice City for Christmas. And if the name wasn't a dead giveaway about this being a game about maybe not so wonderful and nice things, by the time we got there on Christmas, and I don't remember how the conversation started, but we started talking about what the game was about. My mom was like, maybe it's time to bring one of those back. That was one of the gifts that almost went back to the store. It didn't, though, and thank goodness, because I would argue that Vice City's the best game in the Grand Theft Auto franchise, but that's just my opinion, and maybe that's a source of a ringer in the future. So that's my experience, guys, with video gaming. My mom really also was kind of, she just didn't like the themes, didn't like especially the profanity and things like that, and I completely understand that. I never felt that way until I saw my brother playing San Andreas, and I just felt dirty. I just felt dirty. Like the game was just make you blush with all the profanity and racial epithets and everything. It's just like, ugh. I never really got into that. Anyway, so that's my wrap up of last week's Ringer about parents. Thanks for the contributions, guys. And I'll say this: one other thing out there, I'm experimenting right now, so you guys are going to have to bear with me. It's become obvious that there might need to be a little bit more of a face